Hey guys, it's Karen, my review for the annual DC crossover Elseworlds. And what Elseworlds is essentially about is we center on the character of John Deegan. He is a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, and he is approached by this entity known as the Monitor, who basically gives him this opportunity to be a god, and he ends up rewriting reality, and basically from then, a bunch of the characters that we know in the CWDC universe start to switch. Barry and Oliver end up switching, personalities, and a bunch of other stuff happens, and they have to try to find a way to fix reality, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Elseworlds overall, I was very excited for this crossover. As you guys know, last year's crossover, Crisis on Earth X, I thought was phenomenal. Just the scale of what they were able to accomplish there, and the fact that it wasn't overstuffed last year was incredible. It was just such an epic crossover that honestly put things like most of the DCEU, the world of DC movies to shame, and the fact that that turned out better than most of them is kind of pathetic, but that's a completely different thing. What I'm trying to say is I think that really showed what these crossovers were truly capable of. And going into Elseworlds, I knew it wasn't going to top Crisis on Earth X. I knew for a fact that it wasn't going to be as amazing as that one was, because again, that was like something that you can only really do once. They even said that they are never going to have that type of, they're not going to have that type of budget again for a while, so I wasn't really expecting that from Elseworlds, but I was expecting for a really fun crossover, and for the most part, that is what I got here. I will say right off the bat, this is probably my least favorite of the crossovers that we've seen, but I still really did enjoy it a lot. I still think it's a very fun crossover, and we're just getting into it right now. Now, I don't really need to say too much about the caster because we know for the most part everyone here does do a really good job. I will say right off the bat though, Stephen Amell and Grant Gustin I thought really did shine here, as they usually do, but obviously their chemistry is infectious. They work very well together, but seeing them play different versions of each other was really well done. I liked seeing Stephen Amell channel the Flash persona, and same with Grant Gustin. There's a lot of fun stuff there, and I both thought they did a very good job as usual. However, the star of this entire thing is Oliver Queen. He very much takes center stage, and Amell, as usual, really does do a very good job. He actually does have a pretty good arc in this that I really did enjoy a lot. And I thought he, as usual, really did step up to the plate. I always have really enjoyed him in this role, and I thought he did a very good job here. And then as far as everyone else goes, I mean, I could say like, oh, Melissa Benoist is fantastic and things like that, but you know that Melissa Benoist, Carlos Valdes, Danielle Panabaker, you know by now that all of these cast members are really good. So I kind of want to focus more on the new actors that were here, the new characters that were introduced. How were they? And I will say, for the most part, I really did enjoy them. LaMonica Garrett as the Monitor is really good. I really did enjoy him in this role. I do want to zero in on Tyler Hoechlin, who we have seen sporadically in Supergirl. It's not like this is the first time we've seen him, but this is easily the biggest role he's had, and holy shit did he go for it here. I loved what he did in this crossover. He's playing two very different versions of himself. Throughout the first part, he plays, the Superman that we all know, and of course, he's great at that. Better than Henry Cavill, honestly. I think he's one of the best Supermans that we've ever had. He's just so charming, he's so fun to watch, and he's so charismatic, and I just really loved him in this role. You can tell he just relishes in playing this role, and it makes me wish that we'd get to see him more. It makes me wish that he'd have a more prominent role, in this, in the CWDC universe moving forward, but I understand they use him sporadically, and honestly, I'm glad that they do because he always brings it, but especially in the last half of this miniseries, I thought he really brought it here. I really love what he did. He gets to do some really cool stuff, and I thought he definitely was a huge standout here. Elizabeth Tulloch as well is really great as Lois Lane. She captures the fun, sort of bubbly personality, but you can also see this as someone who's very headstrong. She knows very much who she is, and the chemistry between these two is really great, especially since we didn't get to see her till now. It was definitely worth the wait, and I really did enjoy the chemistry between the two of them throughout this. The two weakest links to me, though, that do definitely stick out. First of all, Jeremy Davis plays John Deegan, and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't really a huge fan of him. I really did not think he was all that great here. A lot of the time, it seemed like he was very much holding back, and that could be more due to who John Deegan is, which we'll get to that a little bit later, but I really didn't think he was all that great. And then Ruby Rose for me, I enjoy Ruby Rose a lot of the time, but I have to say it. She's playing the same character in basically everything, and I really didn't think she was that great here. I really did not buy her as Batgirl in this crossover. Maybe she's gonna convince me, but so far, I'm not really impressed by her. She didn't really do anything all that different. It felt like basically every other role I've seen Ruby Rose play. That's why I actually liked her in John Wick Chapter 2, because she got to play a very different role there. But here, she's just doing the exact same thing, and I just wasn't really all that impressed by her. Other than that, though, the rest of the cast here is very good. They really all do shine, and I was definitely, impressed by the acting here. What I do want to talk about, though, is the directing and the writing, because going into this, I knew this was not, again, going to be on the epic scale of Crisis on Earth X, and it's not. This is much more of a fun crossover, and I do think it very much works as one. There's a lot of fun interplay throughout this, a lot of fun moments, especially in the first part, that you can tell that they really do get to do a lot of fun stuff with, Barry and Oliver, them switching roles. There's a really great scene in the first part that is an amazing callback to the first crossover we've seen between these two, and I absolutely loved it. I really love what they did there, and I thought it was definitely really great. There's a lot of really fun comedic moments there, and I think they really did play up on that quite well. The serious moments also are really good. I do think there are some really good emotional moments throughout this, especially for Oliver. Like I said, he does have a pretty big arc throughout this entire thing, which I really did enjoy because, Barry and Oliver kind of switching places, it gets them to understand each other a bit more, and I definitely did enjoy that a lot. My issue, though, in terms of directing, is I really didn't feel that urgency here. I didn't feel like everything was on the line. It didn't feel as, again, catastrophic as they really wanted it to be. It kind of felt like they were holding back a bit, and we'll get more into that with the writing, but for the most part, the tone was very well done. It wasn't trying to be as epic as Crisis on Earth X, and I think they did a good job with that. Now, in terms of the writing, this is where we get into some of my more, some of my more criticisms with this special, because, like I said, I do not think this, was, this hit the highs of course, Christ on Earth X, but even the Invasion one or the first two that they did, like I said, I do think this is very much the weakest. And the biggest reason for that is that I felt a lot of stuff here was very much underwritten. The Barry and Oliver stuff, no, I think that definitely had a lot of fun stuff there. They got to play around with them, being each other's personalities, and I enjoyed that a lot. I like seeing the idea that Barry had to, basically become Oliver. He had to start shooting all these arrows, and he didn't really know how to do that, and he had to get training. I like that idea. I like that Oliver had to start mastering his, he was getting more in touch with his speeding abilities. I thought that was definitely well done. And I think that part of the special was handled very well. The other part that was handled very well is, like I said, what they end up doing with, and the idea of there being all these different sort of realities that Deegan was rewriting, I definitely did enjoy a lot. I thought it was definitely a really cool idea, and I thought they played into that quite well. But my biggest issue with this is that this does not really feel like a mini-series, and that is kind of what they were going for, but I don't think it really worked here. They've said before that they wanted each installment of these three parts to kind of stand out on its own, and I understand that. I get that that's what they were trying to do, but I don't really think it worked here because it makes a lot of this feel just a bit disjointed, and it makes it feel like there was a lot of missed opportunities. The biggest one is what was going on in Arkham City. Everything going on that side, I thought there was a lot of stuff that was very much wasted, especially when it comes to Batgirl, who, like I said, I really did not buy Ruby Rose in this role. Nor did I really see the point of her. The only reason that Batgirl is really here is so they can set up the Batgirl TV series, which, mind you, has not even been passed yet. We don't know if it's actually going to be greenlit. You know, this is a show that could happen, but it very well could not end up happening. There's a good chance that it could end up, you know, being like a Marvel's Most Wanted sort of situation where they kind of write as like a backdoor pilot and then they don't really do anything with it. And in general, Kate Kane does not really have a lot to do in this crossover. She's kind of there just to aid Barry and Oliver, and she has some fun interplay with Cara, but that's really kind of it. And I thought that it was very much a wasted opportunity. I don't really understand why she needed to be here. I think they really could have saved her for something else, because, again, I just didn't really think that she played a big part here. And another thing that the trailer is very much misleading you with is the inclusion of the 90s Flash, John Wesley Shipp. He is literally in this thing for maybe like 10 minutes, and that's kind of it. He's in the second part the most, but he's only in it for 10 minutes. Don't get too used to him. He really does not have much of anything to do, and I really did not understand why they needed to get him here. That felt very kind of fan servicey, and there's a lot of stuff in this crossover that did actually feel that way. The good thing about Crisis on Earth X is that it felt like it was telling a very fluent and, you know, ongoing story, one consistent story, and this very much felt like it was jumping around at points. And again, I did overall end up enjoying it, but it just kind of felt like it wasn't as focused as it should have been. Now, something that was initially a complaint of mine is Cara, because starting off this crossover, Cara really has no purpose here. She really is just kind of here because she needs to be. Barry and Oliver, they go to her because she's the first, you know, obviously her Earth wasn't affected at first by them rewriting reality, and we see that, you know, she ends up helping them in part 2, but it isn't really until the third part where she actually has a significant role in this. And once she has that role, it's great. I really love what they did with her. The whole thing with evil Alex, it was a very interesting idea, but that stuff does not happen until the third part, and I think they could have honestly done that throughout. I would have loved it if she was affected throughout this entire thing, because, you know, I really love Melissa Benoist in this role, but as it stands, I thought that she was a little bit underutilized, but thankfully they did save that in the third part, and what we got with her, I did enjoy a lot, and I thought they did a good job with that overall. But my other issue with this is the character of John Deegan, who, yes, he is the main villain here, and to me, I thought he was very weak. I really did not buy him as the villain. It's not so much because of Jeremy Davis, who, like I said, I didn't think was all that great here, but his storyline in general, he really does not have a lot to do. The most we get is that he wants to be a superhero, and he's rewriting reality so he can become one, essentially. And that's really all we kind of get with him. He was very cartoony. I really did not buy him as a villain. And when you compare him to the very personal mission that the, you know, Nazis were doing in Crisis on Earth X, it just does not compare here. I thought they were much better threats last year, and here, I just didn't really buy him as a villain. He's really not in this that much either. He really does not play that prominent of a role until the third part. Like, you know, obviously he's at the head of everything, but you don't really get to see him a lot. And considering that he's the one who, you know, basically caused all this, you would have thought they would have given him a lot more to do, but he really does not have a lot to do here, and I do think he was very underutilized. But once we got to the third part, then I really started to buy him. Then I actually thought he got a lot better, and I did enjoy what they did with him overall. Also, like most of the crossovers here, there are a lot of winks and nods to things that are really just kind of there for fan service. I already touched upon that with like Batwoman and things like that, but there's a really great sequence with Lois Lane and Clark Kent. What they end up doing there, the way they introduce it is amazing. I loved it. I thought it was really cool, and it was a really nice throwback to something that we've seen before. I really thought it was kind of really cool what they did there. But there are some winks and nods that I thought were just a little too obvious and a little too sort of like, just them kind of acknowledging the audience, and I just wasn't really as into that. Something that did work in this crossover for me is that they did a good job of making it stand out on its own. And what I mean by that is that this is a very unique sort of crossover because this is the first one I've watched ever that I haven't kept up with the Arrowverse. I have been watching a few episodes of The Flash season 5, but I still gotta catch up. Arrow and Supergirl, I'm way behind. And Legends of Tomorrow, they're not in this, so I've been watching that, but they're not in this at all. And for someone like me, like I said, who has not been keeping up, they do a good job where you can watch this on its own. There is a mention of Cicada, there's a mention of Oliver being in jail, but really, other than that, you can pretty much watch this on its own, and, you'll be able to follow what's going on. And I do think they did a good job with that. And again, maybe if I've been keeping up with the Arrowverse, that might not even be, like, a positive for me. But again, I know a lot of people like to do that, and I did that this year, and for the most part, I was able to follow what was going on. There really wasn't anything that, there's a thing that comes up where they talk about how Oliver and Felicity are like a bit on the rocks now, but really, other than that, there wasn't really anything I was all that confused by. It made sense for the most part, and I was able to follow what was going on. Also, in terms of visuals here, this one does not stick out as much, and that is because they scaled back on it a little bit, but I will say, the stuff that we do get here, visual-wise, is really good. There is a fantastic fight at the end of this that I really enjoyed a lot, but there's nothing on the level of, like, the church sequence in Crisis on Earth X. There's nothing on that level, which I actually watched that back this year, and oh my god, it still holds up tremendously. I truly do think that's one of the best things in this entire Arrowverse that they've had going on. But I do think that, I do think that they did a good job for the most part, but they weren't trying to do anything that epic, but the ones that do stick out very well, and I do think there were definitely some very good sequences here. The score is really good, and like I said, in terms of the pacing, I think it could have been a little bit better. There are some things I think they could have gone into a little bit more. We really don't get to see a lot of interplay between Felicity and Barry. It focuses a lot more on Oliver and Iris in the first part, and I do think that was a bit of a mistake. I think they definitely could have approached that in a bit of a different way, and I understand they were trying to make the first part feel like a Flash episode, the second part feel like an Arrow episode, and the third part feel like a Supergirl episode, but I think they could have approached this in a way that was a little bit more like last year, which is why I enjoyed last year's the most, because it felt like a movie. It didn't feel like it was, it was one distinctive episode from, like, each show. It felt like it was one sort of continuous story, and this just didn't feel as much like that. It was a continuous story, but it was in different, we got different characters almost every single episode, and it wasn't as fluent as I think it could have been. I think that it could have been a lot more, a lot better pacing. It was very fast-paced, and it definitely was enjoyable, but I just think there was a lot more they could have fleshed out, especially on the John Deegan side. I really felt like we could have gotten a bit more insight into who he was and things like that. But now I actually do want to get into some spoilers because there is quite a lot that this one does set up. So if you haven't seen Elseworlds, don't watch the rest of this review because I really do want to get into it. Right off the bat, I will say, going to John Deegan, as I touched upon before, like I said, initially wasn't a fan of him. Thought he was very one-note, but once he turned into the darker version of Superman, that's when I really thought he killed it here. Tyler Hoechlin just brought it. It just really, honestly won me over as Superman. I love what he did. I already loved him as Superman, but when he gets to play this darker iteration of him, it was incredible. And I loved what we got with Tyler Hoechlin here. He really, I thought, was bringing it to the, really brought it here. And I just really loved what he did in this role. And going back to, like I said, with Oliver, I really like the way things ended here, where he confronts the Monitor and he tells him that I'm not like Cara and Barry. Cara and Barry, when they do things that are bad, it personally affects them. We saw that great scene in part 3 where Barry almost let a bunch of kids die. He threw up at that. He couldn't bear the fact that he's letting them just die like that. There's no way he would have done that. He is a hero through and through. Oliver, on the other hand, it's a little bit more loose with him. He can sometimes be a hero, but he can also channel a lot of darkness. And I thought that was a really good idea to put him front and center here. I'm interested in seeing where they end up going with that in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I thought it was a really good arc for him. I like that he was front and center. I like that he understood what Barry really has to go through. He always thought that what Barry had to do was kind of fun and games compared to him, and him seeing the struggle that Barry does have, especially when it came to Reverse Flash, I thought was really well done, and I think was one of the standout moments of this entire crossover for sure. And then the stuff going on with Superman and Lois Lane towards the end of this, I understand. Again, they can't get them a lot. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, this might be the last we see them. I don't think it's going to be. I think we're definitely going to see them again. And I think this is really setting up Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is really what I want to get into. This entire crossover essentially is set up for the next crossover next year, which is going to be the Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline. Now, as usual, I'm not familiar with this story because I don't read the comics and things like that, but I'm glad that they're going back to like that grand scale of what they did last year. It makes sense that they couldn't do it this year because it was just so expensive. But I'm pretty sure next year is going to be like last year's crossover, and I'm very excited to see how that turns out. The deal that Oliver made with the Monitor, that's going to be very interesting to see. I'm interested in seeing what that's really all about, what they agreed upon, what's really going to happen there, because obviously we knew that the Monitor was basically trying to train them to see how they would deal with a crisis, because he clearly knows of some sort of crisis that's being set up. However, his motivation in general just seems a bit unclear. Like, what is he really setting them up for? What is really sort of, what is coming? What is the storm that's coming? Because we kept hearing about it in the crossover and never really happened. There was never like this huge thing that ended up happening. Like, it was very minimal what ended up happening, because that was only really in the third part. And sure, once, they switched, then it was, it was pretty big, but it wasn't as prominent as we expect it to be. And I think they're saving that for Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I found very interesting. This is really the first crossover that does not end with all this finality. It doesn't end on a happy note. There's actually still a lot more to come. And I understand at the end that Batwoman was the one to call Oliver about this and, warn him about this thing that's coming. But I do think they very much could have saved her, and I think definitely they could have waited for Crisis on Infinite Earths. As far as the Legends, is the Legends going to play a role in the next one? I think they will. I think the Legends are actually going to play a pretty big role in Crisis on Infinite Earths. They weren't in this one, which I understand. There was already a lot going on, and you definitely couldn't have fit them in there. But I really am interested in seeing what they end up doing here. I think it's a really cool idea. It just makes this feel a bit lesser, and I think that's essentially what's going to end up happening. I think next year's crossover, they're really going to bring it again. It's going to be, like I said, very high. It's going to be on a much bigger scale. It's going to be very grandiose like last year's, and I think it's going to make this crossover feel a bit lesser, and I do think that was maybe just a bit of a mistake to include that at the end. They haven't really done that with any other crossover before. And like I said, that was one of the certain like winks and nods I was kind of referring to, but I'm still excited to see what they do here, and I do think it was a good ending overall. Oh yeah, also, I wanted to keep this as a spoiler because they don't really show anything of it in the trailer, but going back to characters that were very much just here for fan service, Nora Freeze. What was the point of her? Why was she introduced here? I mean, she didn't play any sort of role in this whatsoever. It was just a little, like, nod where we're hearing her say, oh, I'm Nora Freeze, and Caitlin comes upon her, but they didn't do anything with her, and I thought it was a very odd decision to just kind of have her there. I don't know why she even needed to be a part of this thing. I get it that we were in Arkham, and I get it that they were trying to set up the idea of Arkham, but the thing is, we know we're not going to see Mr. Freeze. We know for a fact that that's a Gotham thing. That's not something we're probably going to see on the Arrowverse until Gotham is over, which I guarantee you, once Gotham's over, we're going to start to see more iterations of, like, those characters maybe transfer over to the Arrowverse, but until that's over, I don't know why we need to show Nora Freeze. They didn't really do anything with her, and I'm all for them taking characters that are a little bit lesser and making them something more important, but they didn't do anything of interest with her, and again, it just seemed like something they're very much putting on hold for Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I do think that was a mistake overall. Overall, Elseworlds is a lot of fun. This was definitely, like I said, not on the level of some of the other crossovers. I thought it had a really good arc for Oliver. I like where they ended up going with that. The interplay between him and Barry is as strong as it's ever been. Supergirl, while at first not having a lot to do, really did made up for it in the third part. But for me, like I said, the star of this entire thing was Tyler Hoechlin. He just completely killed it in this entire thing. I thought he was really at the top of his game here. There are a couple, like I said, castings that I think are a bit miscasted. Ruby Rose, Jeremy Davis, not as good as I think they could have been. But I did enjoy it overall. I definitely thought it was a lot of fun. I just wish it was a little bit more fluent. I think there was a few more things they could have dived into. And at the end of the day, while I wasn't as satisfied as I could have been, it still was really solid. I still really did enjoy it. So at the end of the day, I am going to give the annual crossover overall, the DC crossover overall, Elseworlds, a B. But over, guys, in my review of Elseworlds, I'm you guys saw this cross overall. Loved your thoughts in it. I do plan on catching up on Arrow, Supergirl, Flash, all of them. Again, I know I'm very behind on basically all of them. I've even only seen like 2 episodes of this season of Legends Tomorrow, so I really got to catch up. I just really have not had the time as of late, but I do plan on catching up before the, seasons do come back, so definitely look forward to that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, which be prepared, guys. There's a lot of movie reviews coming. We are very much at the tail end of this year, so there's a lot of stuff coming your way, so definitely get ready for it. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.